Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. I'm Kevin Smith, and I'm so honored today to have a very good friend of mine, Mr. John Collins, join us on this episode of Leadership Synergized, where it's my goal just to allow our guests, to bring their career learnings, teachings, and understandings to help you as a viewer and the listener perhaps utilize their experiences as they work to pay it forward. Each guest is someone who I've been acquainted with for a number of years and have really made a difference in my life, whether it's been a year of professional relationship or decades of professional relationship. And John and I met about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, as we both were in the same group. John, not sure if you remember or not, with the Gallup Strengths program. And we were talking about that before we came on air in this episode. But John touched me as someone who has such a caring heart, serves such a wide variety of industries, if you will. But in particular, his experience that he's going to share with his largest customer base, with his coaching and training organization. And we'll have a chance for him to share how that works and where you can reach out and contact him to get more information about John's services as we go through this episode. John's going to stay with us for 2 episodes. And wow, I've talked way too much in this intro, John. God bless you for being here, my friend. I know you've got other plans with family today and the weekend, and just want to thank you so much for being here.
No, Kevin, it's really great to see you. I've been looking forward to this. I'm sorry it took so long to get it scheduled, but as I was telling you, my travel's been a little bit crazy, but it's settled down now. And so you've got me for the hour. So this is great.
Well, I appreciate it very much. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners are going to gain a lot of knowledge and experience. And for those of you just joining Leadership Synergized perhaps for the first time, we don't talk about everything that necessarily has worked on a smooth yellow brick road paved area, if you will, for leadership. We share where we've learned from falling down and from observations of things that haven't worked in our careers in life. And John, that's really where it comes from for all of us in this coaching world today.
Oh, yeah. Look, adversity is the greatest teacher, right? And anybody that hasn't experienced adversity in their life is going to really have a difficult time when adversity does come, especially if they're in a leadership position. Yeah, we learn from our bumps and bruises.
John, you mentioned your travel. You've been very busy, following you on LinkedIn and social media. You're traveling, you're speaking, you're providing training, you're providing coaching. Take just a moment and provide your background, your organization, your business, and how you serve.
So what I am, Kevin, is I am an authoritative leadership and expertise coach. And what that means is I work with leaders and professionals that are in authoritative occupations and that require high levels of expertise to either earn the trust of the public or earn the trust of some consequential stakeholder that impacts the quality of people's lives. So I work a lot with people, forensic experts, attorneys. I work in law enforcement. I've worked with engineers, architects, and so forth. And so these are high expertise professions. My own background was in forensic science. I was a forensic scientist for 20 years. I retired my career as the director of forensic science for the state of Michigan. So I ran all of the crime laboratories for the state of Michigan. And I really took an interest in leadership early in my career, basically because I was exposed to such poor leadership amongst some of the individuals that I reported to. Certainly not all, but enough that I thought, my goodness, there's got to be a better way of doing things than this. So I started giving talks and then teaching workshops and then coaching, and it grew. And I really love what I do, and I travel, but over time my travel is subsiding and I'm doing more and more coaching, and I love coaching because I love the connection that you make with the clients, as you very well know.
John, you talk about the poor leadership aspect. What your experiences, what's poor leadership look like? And perhaps just sharing just a little bit as you ponder that question for just a second, because I know it provides a vast universe of responses in that setting. But in particular, when we see leaders who maybe don't have sustained success, why do you think that is?
Kevin, that's the $1 million question. And it's one that I think really needs to be understood. So you and I both, we think very highly of Gallup as strengths coaches. One of the more impactful studies that Gallup did not too long ago. It was in the early part of the 21st century, but they basically identified that only about 10% of the human population has what we would call a naturally high capacity for effective leadership. And that's stunning. But the problem is that we work in an age where things are changing so quickly. What happens is that the feeling that you're just trying to survive as a leader, trying to survive as a team, that does something very important and very dangerous that people need to be aware of. And what it does is it triggers hierarchical behaviors. The number one threat, as certain as I'm sitting here talking to you, Kevin, the number one threat to leadership today, and it's a pervasive problem throughout the workforce, are hierarchical behaviors, or what we would call superiority signaling. And the research is overwhelming on this, that hierarchical behaviors break down teamwork, because what it does is it sorts people into layers of superiority or inferiority. And members of a team do not have the energy or the motivation or the enthusiasm to contribute their best when they are treated like inferiors. But the problem is that increasingly things are becoming so stressful and we have so much access to information. And now we've got this artificial intelligence thing that has come down the pike. There is more in the workforce today and on many teams out there, and law enforcement is just one example of this, that when you are in a position that you feel like you're struggling to survive, it tends to trigger those hierarchical behaviors, and hierarchical behaviors break down teamwork. And so I think it's really a core part of my practice to help pretty much every client that I work with recognize these tendencies that we all have, because hierarchy it has value. It keeps us organized. It helps us to survive, but it tends to be poisonous to teamwork. And so I think that's where it's at, and people have to be aware of it.
Thank you for sharing that, John, with your background and experience. And as I'm listening to your response, it hits me. Here we are in 2023, the 21st century, and yet the hierarchical aspects still get in the way of things like establishing a collaborative environment, a positive learning growth environment for our employees. Seems counter to what we're hearing and seeing it takes to really be successful and build those great companies and organizations today. Why do you think that still lingers there? Is it insecurity of leadership? Is it not maybe having the knowledge and clear understanding, or not understanding what it is to commit to relationships, collaborative environments for the team members they're responsible for in an organization?
Yeah, I think that some insecurity does play a role in that without question. And I think what goes hand in hand with that is selfishness, that I think too often people are shuffled into leadership positions without being adequately prepared for it. And so when they get into that leadership position, their number one priority is just to survive and do no harm. And so it's a very limited view of the possibilities that you have as a leader. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to hold on to your position. You're trying not to get fired. You're trying not to do any damage. You're trying not to damage the bottom line. And that is just very primitive, basic sets of priorities that are far afield from the type of attitude and mindset that you have to have if you really want to cultivate teamwork and you really want to bring the best out of people. How can you focus on bringing the best out of other people when you're just focused on yourself and trying to survive? You can't. And I'll close that answer, Kevin, by just adding one more thing. And that is that you hear the term onboarding a lot, onboarding new employees. And this is something that I really preach with a lot of my organizational clients, is that you have to have management onboarding as well. Is that when you're putting people into new managerial positions, especially when it's their first ever managerial position, which for a lot of people happens in their late 20s, early 30s, that you have to have a structured, organized, effective onboarding that helps that individual understand the responsibilities that they're being entrusted with. But it just doesn't happen. Even in the best organizations, we push people into management positions based upon their performance as a professional. And then they get into their management position and they realize, my gosh, the competencies that I had that allowed me to earn the respect of my team and my organization are not the competencies that I need to be successful in this position. And so we've got to do a better job in our organizations to prepare our managers when they are entrusted with new responsibilities.
Thank you, Sid. I couldn't agree more. Let's back up a little bit. We talked about the Gallup Strengths program, and John, I think you and I share the same level of respect for that program, the strengths assessment, how it can be used, not only for individual, but for organizations with teams, and clarifying more of a focus in that growth and development in the areas of our strengths and less in the areas of weaknesses. I grew up in an era to where the focus was you did this wrong, you got to fix this, whether it's your weakness or not, put all your time in there. And it was more of just a hammer thing with no guidance on how to go about it or really to understand what it really meant to go fix and improve. The Gallup program, and I think you would agree with me, and I don't mean to put words, on your behalf here, the Gallup Strengths program really allows us to better understand our strengths, even if we think we know who we are, understand what it means to really be who we are, but yet see where we don't live to that full potential and focus our growth there. Talk a little bit about your experience and takeaway in those segments and how you've seen the Gallup Strengths program work to further develop today's leaders or managers, if you will, on what's next for them in that next role within an organization, or perhaps as they look to transition to a new industry.
The impact that I've seen with regards to the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which you and I both know is among the most scientifically validated of the trait assessments, as opposed to type assessments, less scientifically valid. And so it's a fantastic instrument that has been developed over decades, as we know. But the impact that I have seen that I find really both useful as a coach, but also inspirational, is that it facilitates acceptance. It facilitates personal acceptance of self as people understand, man, these are my strengths. This is how I wired. I'm starting to make a little bit more sense to myself now. I understand why I do things the way that I do. And I might even start to understand why I frustrate other people the way that I have in the past, because those are just my strengths that are in raw form that need some refinement. But it also has a really profound impact on teams because members of teams can accept each other better. Gosh, I'm starting to understand you more. I know your strengths. I know your leadership domain, for example. You're a relationship builder, executor, influencer, strategic thinker. And so that acceptance and that understanding, it's almost like lifting a fog, and people start to see each other for who they really are. And they understand that, look, I value you, but gosh darn it, there's some things about you that have really frustrated me in the past, but I understand that now. It's not because of what's wrong with you. It's really because of what's right with you, what you're good at, and it's just coming out in a sort of raw form, and we got to talk through that. I feel like the Clifton Strengths Assessment from a coaching perspective is just absolutely invaluable to helping clients understand themselves, helping them understand their team members. And then you, as a coach, you can use that if you have the opportunity to work with a team to create that synergy and to create that mutual understanding that becomes the bedrock for collaboration. I would say that from that acceptance, what Clifton Strengths is doing is it's helping facilitate collaboration in ways that it couldn't when people didn't understand themselves or their teammates very well.
I love that and could not agree with you more. And just to provide myself as an example, through years of leadership, by the way, I wish I'd have had this data point because I see the 34 strengths assessment in particular, a great data point. I wish I'd have had it in the 1970s.
I know. I've thought the same thing.
You and I were talking before we came on air with this recording. For me, I've experienced a lot of evaluations, if you will, feedback from superiors have given a lot. And I've walked away from both sides feeling as if something's missing. The connection wasn't there. But the strengths assessment, when I took it, I thought I know myself. It took me a while to wrap my mind around. I'm in my 60s. It's an old dog, new trick type of scenario. But I took it and I see my top 10 strengths, for example. I look at number one, responsibility. And as I started understanding what Gallup's, as you said, 5, 6+ decades of research, millions of surveys of leaders, of parents, of managers, of people from all walks of life and industries has brought this to, I really didn't know who I was in that piece. I have not perfected the use of that strength yet. I still fall back and I commit, maybe without knowing what I'm fully committing to. I commit to do something when reality with my team or someone else I may network with, they've got a greater strength. And so Gallup Strengths said, I'm not sure any program is meant for this. It's not really, not that you perfect it, but you start to understand when those weak areas within your strength segment start to take over and you can back up again in that aspect. But to your point, it really brings a scientific data point aspect that I've had. I think you said you've administered over 300 plus assessments. I know I'm in the 200 plus area, from educators to manufacturers, service leaders, business owners. In those aspects, I know you work with law enforcement, attorneys, and some others in public safety. I've yet to have an individual tell me that what they saw with their assessment, whether it was a top 5 or a 34, was surprising or that they disagreed with it.
Even amongst the cynics. And that's the thing that's really interesting, is that people that are cynical, like I've had people, they'll put it in quotes, oh, another assessment or another team building exercise. And then you ask them, you ask the cynical individual, what did you think of your assessment? And they're like, oh, it was spot on. And so that, to me, when you can sell the cynics on this, which happens all the time, like I said, but I'm well over 300, and I have yet to have somebody say, oh, this just didn't fit me. And what's fun is when your client takes that assessment and they take it to their significant other, wife, husband, or whatever, partner, children, and share that with people that they know. That really helps to reinforce, because a lot of times those loved ones or those close individuals in their lives look at it and say, oh yeah, that's you. And this is how I see it. This is how it tends to show up when I'm with you.
I could not agree more. I was actually thinking the same aspect as I took my report and shared with my wife. Woo is way down my list. That's that whole aspect. When there's large gatherings, I've never been one that wanted to jump in the middle of it. Early in our marriage, she and I, we had our different approaches in that piece. I preferred small groups. She preferred getting out in those settings. But again, to your point, and I appreciate you sharing and going there, John, the strengths assessment isn't just about profession and career. It's something that's every day, every moment, every aspect and responsibility we have in our lives.
A great question to ask clients. In fact, I do this in my strengths workshop. Is what I'll do is I'll break the group into small groups, and I'll have them share with each other, when you were a child, about the age of 7 to 12, somewhere in there, what were the things that the adults in your life appreciated about you, your parents, your teachers, your coaches, whatever? And then what was something about you that frustrated them? And what you will find is both is usually a very early life hint at your strengths starting to emerge. So, that really talkative child that can't be quiet in class, that's communication building, right? The quiet child that doesn't say much, that might be your strategic thinker, right? That's thinking through things. And so it's a lot of self-awareness that comes from it. That's the great value of it.
I love the word self-awareness. And John, we'll pick up on that in our second episode. But before we wrap up here this first episode, and thank you so much again, my brother, for being with us and sharing your words of wisdom and experience and guidance. I know you have a podcast yourself and you share your expertise. Talk a little bit about your podcast, how it's going, and what maybe is in the future for John with his coaching, training, and leadership development business.
So I actually do 2 podcasts. One is very specific. It's called the Crime Lab Coach Cast, and it's for forensic experts. And we talk about issues, challenges, and opportunities. It's going great. And we're actually in the process. We've got some interest now amongst some sponsors. So we're going to be having some sponsorship of the podcast soon. So we're in the process of monetizing it. And then we can use that to grow the impact of the podcast. My Critical Victories podcast, which was my first one, is in the process of being reformatted. And the reason is because of the release of my book last year. And then the audiobook came out this February. It's called The New Superior. And we're actually changing the name of the podcast to The New Superior. And we're going to be talking about issues related to authoritative leadership and the leveraging of expertise. So we're in a little bit of a holding pattern on that one right now, but I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do with it. So trying to assess the best way to kick that off. And my plan is to make a decision on the direction of that this fall. And then we're going to start that up again.
Yeah, I forgot about your book. Talk a little bit. How's the book been received in the marketplace?
I'll tell you, I've done absolutely no marketing with it. That's something that I'm working on this summer. But amongst my own network, I can tell you that, and this is even among people that don't know me, they've said that The New Superior is one of the best leadership books they ever read. And that means a lot to me because I know a lot of these folks have read a lot of leadership books. The thing that I'm so excited about, Kevin, is the audiobook just turned out phenomenal. I hired a production company out of Los Angeles, and I was able to get a guy named Michael Chamberlain, who's one of my favorite audiobook narrators. And I reached out to him and he's, I'd love to do this. This is right in my genre range. And he just did a fantastic job. And it almost brought tears to my eyes when I was listening to it because it just it was what I envisioned when I wrote the book. So it's going well. And it's going to continue to get better through the year as I start to get the word out. But every workshop that I do, I take copies of my book or I give people information about the book. I think it's gonna have legs, and I think it's going to be impactful over the long term.
I couldn't be happier for you and proud of you. You're certainly hitting a market and the message that's much needed in our world. And I'm excited for you to have the opportunity to expand it through those mediums.
Yeah, me too, Kevin. I appreciate having conversations like this. It makes people learn a lot from conversation. It's important.
John, again, thank you so much for being with us in this episode, and I appreciate your willingness to stick around. We're going to record a second episode and pick up more on the self-awareness and leaders' struggle with survival and talk about the whole still aspect and model and where maybe today's leaders can merge their needs in that area. So thank you again for sticking around, and just God bless you for all you do to serve. I'm so proud of you, and I love the passion. Every conversation you and I have had from that first introduction in that Gallup certification class, which by the way was digital, right, through Zoom or whatever.
After the pandemic.
We used, yeah.
After the pandemic,
right after the pandemic, you've touched me as someone who cares deeply about the message. And if you're looking at someone who's going to be consistent with a constancy of purpose and serving your needs and developing the leadership skills you're looking for yourself or for your organization, John's the man to do that because he is consistent and he is constant with the message. John, I appreciate you so much, and we're going to come back and have John again next week.
Look forward to it, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and watching Leadership Synergized. And again, thank John Collins. And we're going to talk more about how you can reach out to John and learn more from his leadership experiences coming up with next week's episode. Just remember, leadership isn't all about a panic. It's not about rushing and being the first to the finish line. Sometimes we have to take a step back, be still, and focus on where we want to get to and the best route to get there. We're going to talk more about John's experiences in those areas next week. God bless you for all you do. Thank you. And always know, I appreciate you and all you do as a leader.